to share it after.
Sure. Thank
Okay,
you.
we're live. So,
Great.
hey everyone, I love to stream with really badass women in the space of healing. And I came across Sophie's Instagram profile, honestly, on the Explore page, which I don't spend a lot of time on. I personally don't spend a lot of time there because I will get lost there, not creating my own stuff. So came across a post and it was about you being the constant parent, or it was about being the constant parent for your child and your child thriving. And so it's so interesting because I am constantly coaching that with women and sometimes men who come to me with high conflict, hostile situations. So I will let Sophie introduce herself. She's an expert on narcissism. And I see a lot of people who say they're experts on narcissism, but they're not. And so when I saw her content, I was like, okay, she's the real deal. So I hope you guys find some value in this today. Sophie, you introduce yourself and then go from there.
Thank you so much, Chelsea. Yeah. So I specifically help people heal from narcissistic abuse, whether that's from a parent or a partner, so that they can, rebuild their self-worth, rebuild their self-trust, rebuild their self-belief, rebuild their self-confidence, and then take the bold action of stepping into their I'm unstoppable, watch me win era, which is really about amplifying every area of their life. Because when you're going through narcissistic abuse or trying to heal from it, it really takes away your self-confidence and your ability to grow and to transform your life. Hold on, my son is home today from school. Yes, baby.
That's okay.
I'm on a call right now, sweetheart. We'll do that after, okay? Okay, thank you, honey. So it's about healing from narcissistic abuse, whether that's from a parent or a partner. And then it's also, I specialize in helping parents become the emotionally healthy parent for their child, because your child doesn't just inherit your love. They inherit your trauma, your fears, your trauma responses, your insecurities, your doubts, the level at which you allow people to disrespect you, your limiting beliefs, your limiting self-talk. And so what most people don't realize is they want to really help their children understand their narcissistic ex, or to not be controlled by the narcissistic ex. And they want to be able to call the narcissistic ex out, but it's not about that. It's about really doing the healing work yourself so that you can heal your unhealed wounds, so your child doesn't inherit the trauma and become like you, somebody who attracts a narcissist, or becomes like their narcissistic parent and steals and manipulates love. And so the only way for the child to see a different way is for one parent to start to show up differently. And so usually it's the parent who attracted the narcissist that's more willing to do the work. And they end up realizing, coming to the epiphany, that they have a lot of their own patterns and survival mechanisms that they need to work on so that the child doesn't inherit that. So that's basically the work that I do.
Absolutely. I mean, it's interesting. Gosh, so much there. My head is reeling with what I want to talk about. It's a couple of key ideas. So when I first got divorced, and obviously if anybody's followed me for a long time, or those of you that watch, that I'm not a huge fan of talk therapy, because I'm a huge fan of rewriting your story of your life and carrying on now. Like, I'm not a huge fan of constantly rehashing trauma. So I'll say that. I think it can be helpful for the awareness piece. But one amazing piece of advice that I did get when we first started our very hostile custody with my narcissistic parent, or my narcissistic partner, was this piece of advice. This therapist said, listen, like countless studies show that as long as one person is constant and operating in love, and this was a Christian therapist, he's like, and operating in love. And at the time I didn't even really understand what love was. I had to redo my own healing around that. But that the child does not have a tendency to become a narcissist. And so, as you can imagine, with my children, I was experiencing manipulation tendencies. I was experiencing victimhood tendencies. I was experiencing low confidence tendencies. It was like so crazy. And then I thought, because they were children in elementary school, I could see the writing on the wall. I'm like, oh, this only gets worse in the teen years, right? And now we're in the teen years. So as somebody who's like 10 years ahead in the journey now, I'm always telling people, like, you do the work and it gets better. You do the tactical work, and I promise you, you will see the breakthrough. It might not feel it at the time, but you mentioned something like calling out a narcissist. And this is something that is really interesting that a lot of people don't understand. It can be, I mean, depending on the degree of narcissism, it can be unsafe to call out a narcissist. Like, it's always emotionally unsafe, but it can also be very unsafe. And so I at first would really wanted to expose that with my kids and really wanted to be the orchestrator and their Holy Spirit and their everything else. And what I realized was that not only is that not possible, but it wasn't productive. And so we took this radical shift. I mean, after my divorce, I developed an autoimmune disease, which was the catalyst for my practice. And then I started tracking tons of women and data that, you know, after setting myself free, simply by unwrapping myself from a narcissistic parent, actually two, and a narcissistic parent and then a narcissistic partner. And now I've gone on to have this like 10-year strong marriage where we work on things together and it's amazing. I can say there's a direct correlation where your nervous system, your body, you just don't even recognize yourself anymore. Like something that I teach is the real root cause of autoimmune is like you don't know yourself, because a body that's made in the image of God doesn't innately attack itself. It doesn't want to do that. You are somehow not recognizing who you are, and then the body's trying to course correct. So what's super cool is that that's why you see that pattern coming out of abusive relationships. And so in my practice, I'm always talking about, hey, what's the environment in the home? What's your marriage like? What's your partner situation like? And then obviously if we've had divorces, but that's so cool. I loved what you said. So, I mean, tell me what that looks like in your words. Like, okay, let's say you want to be the constant parent. You don't want to expose a narcissist. What would you tell, like, what does that look like?
Well, it's more about, one, you have to do your own healing. So you have to do the work for yourself to be able to understand your own patterns, your own thoughts, your own identity. Like, how is it that you allow yourself to be disrespected? How do you disrespect yourself? So there's all of that piece. That's your own growth and development around your mindset, your belief systems, your identity. Yeah. And then it's about being able to identify what the manipulation is. So there's like red flags when your child comes home and is distancing themselves from you, or feeling cold, or feeling guilty for being in your presence and not being with the narcissistic parent. Or they're saying things like, you know, mom or dad says that you're selfish, or you never cared about us. You know, those are the types of things. You don't want to get defensive. You don't want to start blaming. You don't want to start attacking the other parent, because then you're just going to feed into the narrative that the narcissistic ex already has created with the child. And then they're going to be able to say, see, I told you it was them all along. What you want to be able to do is to neutralize the conversation. So there's very specific ways to handle the conversation. So like, you know, mommy and daddy said, you don't love me anymore. So it would be more like, well, what have I ever done to make you feel like you don't love you? I always love you. I want you to know that you're always safe here. I want you to know that you can always tell me your feelings. What else would you like to say? And then it's about really learning how to have the child feel safe enough to open up. So it's like when the child starts to open up, it's like, well, what else would you like to say? Anything else? So it's very specific strategies and conversations to have around how do you spot the manipulation so you can see it in their behavior or in their language. How do you shut it down? How do you neutralize the child's emotion so that you can get them out of a negative tailspin? Because whatever the narcissist is doing is putting them into some form of negative spin. You know, they're going to start to feel guilt or resentment or fear or anger, whatever that is. So we want to get them back to center. And then it's about really learning how to focus on easy activities to rebuild the bond and make sure the child feels safe and comfortable at home. And you consistently be consistent and predictable and unconditional in your love with a very consistent message with strong boundaries. The child will get it. And you know, it doesn't usually happen until the child's in their late 20s, but when they do look back, they start to see it. And so that's why if you're dealing with a narcissistic ex and you have young children, it's like the long game that you're playing. You want to be the emotional anchor and let the narcissistic ex be the chaos, the storm, the drama. Like you just don't even, it's like, it doesn't matter what they're doing over there, whether they're being the fun parent or whether they have a smear campaign about you or whether they're guilting and manipulating the child. None of that is really your business. What's your business is the child and how you show up for the child. And the quicker you can get out of the web, out of that game, you let them be the emotional storm and you be the emotional anchor. Like the faster you can detach from playing their game and you get into this game, the easier it's going to be. You know, people are like, it's hard work. It's only hard work because you've been playing the game of people pleasing, prioritizing your needs, wobbling on your boundaries and letting the narcissist win for so long. Now you have to learn how to play a completely different game. Good job, sweetheart. Yeah, good job.
What a sweet, what a cute.
Yeah, he's home today. He's got a little bit of a rash. So Yeah, it's never about defaming or wanting your child to choose, or even suggesting that the child shouldn't love the narcissist or bad mouthing the narcissist. As much as you want to do that or call them out, it's just not about that, because the child is then going to feel like you've almost become the narcissist because you're acting in very narcissistic ways. It's more about how do you show up and manage your own emotional triggers, so that when your child has something to say, you don't lash out and be like, what? Like, that's not, and it's really important not. Yeah, it's really important to be able to manage yourself, because only in your ability to manage your triggers can you show up in a safe and create an emotional safe space for the child.
That's right. And I mean, here's the deal. It's so interesting. After walking this journey for 10 years, it is the only way. I can attest to that. When my kids were 5 and 2, and I realized some key things, thank God, along the way. Like, so for example, we could see the dysfunction and know what it was. We could see it in our own selves too. Cause I have this thing. I'm like, victimhood and narcissism are very similar. Like, I'm not talking about, hi, I've been hurt. Like, I'm aware of a hurt pattern. That's not what I'm calling victimhood. I'm saying chronically, like you said, showing up in your life like it's hard, it's impossible, I can't, like that hopelessness. It's like, it's all about the chaos, right? And so it's just like not what God does. And so it's interesting how you had to come out from under that. I had to come out from under that and to regulate myself. And then what was really cool is like, you realize, like, and I realized this in my practice, it's why I became a holistic health provider. Children want their primals intact, which would be their parents. And it's their birth parents. Like, so I'm not saying you can't be an adoptive role, a step parent, you can't have a place or a space with a child. 100% you can, grandparent and all that. But your body knows who you came from. Your body knows who created you on this spiritual, supernatural level. You can't like override that. So you learn to like cope in it. So essentially, when you're teaching a child to hate a birth parent, right, you're curating their reality. So what I came in like to the thought process of was like, if I curate who my ex or my mother or whoever is for my child, then I'm doing them a disservice. I'm also creating low confidence. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm also creating the situation where they are being manipulated. Like, so that pulled us right out of.
Well, what do you mean curating? Like, are you positioning them in a poor light or in a good light?
No, that a good light is great. Like, what I mean, but my whole thing has been not lying. So like my thing has been like working in truth. And then when we really healed, it was like putting anything that was dysfunctional, like that, like the boundary that you say you hold, back on my ex. So like, for example, if my kids came home and said something like, I can only control the controllables with myself, right? Like, it was about me. Like, you don't ever get me water, or you don't feed me. Like, what? These are real things that happens like in my life. It would be like, I would be like, here's the food. You know what I mean? Like here's the reality here. And I'm like you, I wouldn't go back and be like, I can't believe your dad said that, or did your dad say that? Like, I wouldn't open up the line of of connection, I guess I'll call it. I don't know another word to call it. Like, once we cut the connection with like my narcissistic ex, it was like, it was done. We weren't going to like play the games, participate. Like, what he did in his house had nothing to do with me. Like, what, and then my kids got older. So for example, I talk better in examples because it's like you live your life, right? My kids got older, and my teen would say like, oh, you're never going to believe what so-and-so did. And I would literally stop her and say, I do not want to hear about your dad and his marriage. Like, right. I'm like, and she would say, like, I would, and you know why? I would say, I'm not going to gossip, because that happened to me for years. And also I would tell her, I was like, I'm not friends with them, and it's none of my business. Like, and it's really not. Like, I'm like, genuinely, it's not. So I'm teaching my kids that like honor is honor. Like, there's like this God code that you keep, right? And we can have all different languages around that. Like, I don't need people to be like aligned in my exact spirituality, but it's like so interesting how it's like there's a way, right? There's a way you live your life in honor. It's like, do unto others as you want done to you. And so I have always kind of operated in that. And then also I used to, when we were married, something I would do is like, it would be like, where's dad? Right? Innocent stuff. I mean, my kids were toddlers when this happened. Now it's like bigger emotional stuff, but it would be like, dad's always working and blah, blah, blah. I used to have a tendency to be like, no, your dad loves you. You know how we do, right? We engage in that kind of like curation of like truth, when really it's like, it's his truth to say that. So you know what I mean? I'd be like, hey, if you feel that, you should take that to your dad.
Right.
Like, you know what I mean? Like I would be
Yeah.
like, and
Yeah.
I'm not
Yeah.
saying I
Yeah.
did it perfectly. I'm saying
Yeah.
that's
Well,
how
you're just
I would
still
do it.
excusing and justifying.
Totally. Like I would be,
Yeah.
and in my mind, that's what I meant when I said curating. I'm saying that you're sort of like, you're participating in a way that doesn't serve anybody's finding truth, right? So,
Well, you're doing a couple of things. Like you're still repeating a pattern from being a wife, protecting the narcissist and his poor
yes,
behavior, and then you're gaslighting your child about who his father really is, or who her father actually really is. And so you're meddling inside of it. And yeah, you really don't need to be getting involved at all. That's a relationship with the child and the father. And so that child should be bringing the concern to the father and let the father deal with it. So yeah,
it's
I agree
so
with you
hard.
100%. Yeah. Well, I think what's hard about that is breaking the pattern of trying to protect, one, your ex-husband because you played that role for so long, two,
Yeah.
protecting your child because you think that is actual protection when it's not. It's gaslighting. It's just
Yeah.
more of that because now and it's not to say that his father doesn't love him or love her. It's just to say that that's not the conversation for you to be having. Yeah.
Totally. And like,
Yeah.
it's also not for you to be deciding, right? It's like, that's one of the most radical things that I had to decide is like, if I actually decide how anyone loves, right? Like I'm in that place of judgment. Like you can kind of
Right.
know that it doesn't work for you, right?
Right.
Or it doesn't
Right.
work for your kids, or you can see if we want to define it in like Christian terms, you can see like the fruit, right, of the spirit. Like if it's not there, you're like, okay, it probably doesn't work. But what's interesting is like, you're not the judge of that. So it's like, for me, I always try to pull myself out of that position, which has been a tactic that we've used. That's so fascinating. I mean, I want to know, so out of all the people that you coach, do you ever see a pattern of chronic illness? And I'll define chronic illness like anxiety,
Yeah.
autoimmune, depression, autoimmune, I could list them all out, but let's just go with like the biggies, like, lupus, arthritis, MS, like the nervous system
Yeah.
stuff,
Yeah.
even diabetes in that category, like coming out of these relationships.
Yeah, I mean, it happened to me. So what happens in a narcissistic relationship is that you abandon yourself. So every time you say yes when you want to say no, every time you prioritize their need over yours, every time you wobble on a boundary, every time you people please, every time you suppress your voice or suppress your intuition, what happens is inside that what you're doing, and it creates an energetic angst. That energetic angst creates inflammation, and inflammation is the precursor to all the autoimmune diseases. And so 80% of autoimmune disease sufferers in North America are women because we've been conditioned to behave that way from a very young age.
Mm-hmm.
And for men, it would show up as in, their conditioning is different. So ours is to prioritize the family, prioritize other people, to not be to be the good girl, to not rock the boat. For men, it's like, don't be vulnerable, don't show weakness, don't show your emotions. And so for them, it would show up in something more like a prostate cancer. So it's like, rheumatoid arthritis, fibromyalgia, lupus, endometriosis. So I had endometriosis, and then 6 months into my divorce, before my divorce was over, I was diagnosed with breast cancer, which is another manifestation of that type of energetic angst in the body. And so your body knows when you're abandoning yourself. Your body knows when you're out of integrity. Your body knows when you're not being treated with respect, love, kindness, and your body knows when you want something different than what you're doing. And unfortunately, our conditioning is keeping men and women stuck in survival patterns and stuck inside of relationships that are narcissistic and abusive, and the abuse is invisible. So it's really challenging for it to get called out.
Absolutely. Now I want to go like way deeper. So
Sure.
I'm like, not me wanting to talk about prostate cancer and breast cancer. So okay, I see that all the time. Like every male client that I have had that has come to me with a prostate inflammation, which is going to manifest in a cancer. We can see that tendency on the bioresonance device that I use for diagnostics and metatherapy, along with the Soul Sync method, which I developed, which is the brain retraining out of those patterns. 100% of what has happened is narcissistic, either mother or partner. So, and probably family line too, once we get down in it, you know what I mean? Like generations of that.
Well, the mother is not narcissistic, or the father is not narcissistic without having learned that from a grandparent. And that's coming from wounding, which is coming from, like, I think that a lot of people aren't putting the dots together, that it's it's more like a societal traumas that are causing narcissism,
Yes.
so like like slavery, the indigenous residential schools that happen in Canada, is like sexism, the slavery, or the sex trafficking situations that's going on in the world. Like all the wounding that's happening is what's creating people to have narcissistic characteristics or tendencies, and then that is how they're parenting from the wound, and that's how the cycle repeats itself all the way down. And it takes like it stays in this family system until somebody says, I want to break the cycle, like it ends with me. And that person who stands up and is brave enough to do the work then heals for the upline, which is the lineage, and the downline, which is the legacies for everybody who comes after them. But yeah, it's in the family line. It's not, in my opinion, all of a sudden one narcissist is born today in 2025 and that did not live anywhere. Like
Right.
that's just not how it's a learned behavior, in my opinion. Yes, there's genetic predispositions to it, but I don't believe that narcissism or narcissistic characteristics or qualities is only born out of a genetic predisposition. I think epigenetics has a lot to do with it, and I think that parenting has a significant amount to do with it.
It does. I have a radical different belief in genetic predisposition, so I don't really believe in it. I mean, I believe in it to a degree, but I don't believe it in the way the allopathic or the science community teaches it. I believe that it's more spiritual, frequency in nature, and when people have it, left their spiritual father and mother's houses, they're under the authority, they're not growing up, they're infantilized, like so many things, then that will lead you to manifest similar patterns of your ancestors. It's like, it's exactly what happens. And that's why you see stuff in family lines. And it's very convenient for pharma or allopathy to describe it as a family medical history. And not that there's not a place for some of that, but it is not like they have isolated it like it sounds. It's not like, oh, your genetics are broken and you're broken.
Right.
That idea will keep people sick for sure.
And stuck.
Yes.
Well, and it's an excuse to absolve yourself of the responsibility to do the work, because the work is not easy.
Yeah, okay. I was about to ask you about that. So that was like going to be my lead in. So interestingly enough, I did that. I was the first person to break narcissism in my family line 100%. Like, I know it. There was covered up sexual sin. There was so much going on. And it was very intense. And so people are like, you ask yourself, like, why wouldn't somebody, I used to be the person that would say, why wouldn't somebody want to leave? You know what I mean? Why wouldn't they? Or why couldn't they do it sooner or whatever? Like, you just ask yourself. I wouldn't do it from a place of judgment, but because it's a bitch.
It's a lot.
Like, when I decided to take a stand and realize like all the patterns of abuse that had got me in my marriage, and took radical responsibility for how I got there, which was largely to do with some of myself as well, and attracting that tendency and being quite narcissistic myself, I realized that my entire family homeostasis was going to have to either agree and admit that it was very abusive, or carry on. And I'll never forget the conversation that I had with my grandparents. So, I mean, I'm not going to go into my entire story, but basically my family had so much narcissism that my divorce started happening, and it drew on for 2 years. And people won't be surprised, neither will you, that it was centered around custody and schools for the kids and control. And so my own mother ended up testifying against me for my ex for custody of my kids. And so, yeah, there's a lot.
That's hard.
And it was hard. And it was a gift though. Like, it was a complete gift. And I mean, I've talked about that on several podcasts. She still nannies sometimes for my ex. Like, and my kids are teens, but she'll still.
Are you in contact with her?
No, haven't been for 9 years. So I'll never forget the day that we stopped speaking. And that's a whole nother dynamic too. So not only did I have to like free myself from my ex and my kids, I had to do it for my mother as well. Yeah. And so anyway, it's hard to cut out a primal. I tell my kids that all the time when they're angry or whatever. It is excruciating. And so what happened, but with that, was not only her, it was her brother who also believed in her. And it was her parents who also believed in her. So 2 of my grandparents, and it was a lot. It was like an entire side of my family that was like, hey, and like, I will never forget the day. Like, I said to my grandparents, I'm like, and I had been made aware of, ironically, through a connection with my dad, who my mom did the classic thing and made sure I didn't feel like he was loving or wanted me. Of course, you know what happened in my 20s, I discovered another truth.
Yeah. It usually does happen in the 20s. I agree with you on that. That's why parents got to be, they got to be able to play the long game.
The long game. So what happened is that I knew my heritage spiritually. I knew where I was from. My dad did have custody of me, but get this, my most vivid memories from childhood, and this is what I encourage these women all the time. I'm like, are 3 weeks out of the summer I spent with my grandparents. That's the only time I ever saw my dad and my family side that was healthy. The only time. So out of 365 days of the year, I was in that abuse dynamic. And then 3 weeks was like the reprieve, right? So sometimes when I'm in my 50-50 agreement, I remember that. I'm like, we're okay. Like, we're okay here, you know? So it's like, anyway, my mom, she had curated a reality that became not a reality. And so of course I'm mad at like both my parents at this point. But what ended up happening was that I reconnected with my dad and I got more bits and pieces of her story and her trauma and different layers. And when I went through my divorce, I had to reach a point. I'll never forget. I told her, I finally said, I'm like, this just doesn't work for me. Like, I'm like, I literally I cannot talk to you again until after the divorce because you chose to testify. Like, it's not punishment. I was like, if you want to pick up counseling, if you want to pick it back up after and you want to do that, I'm in. But for now, I can't because my attorney said no. You know what I mean? It wasn't even me. I'm like, it was like, I needed a boundary for like 3 months to finalize the divorce because she was now on the witness list for the other side. So I couldn't like have her in my house. And, you know, what was interesting is that was that. I mean, 9 years later, here we are. And that was never picked back up. But she sees my kids and she has a relationship with them. But, you know, the truth comes out. Like eventually it came out like, you know, my kids have asked me stuff or said stuff. And so it's a lot, but it is the long game. There is a point where you will reach with your kids where they grow up and they start to form their own thoughts. And now having a 16-year-old and a 13-year-old, I'm like, I can tell you, like, there's a point where I was asked, like, what happened with you and Nene? You know what I mean? Like, there's a point where it happens and you get glimpses of breakthrough. you get breakthrough, or you see your child suddenly starting to make a choice. Like, I remember when my 16-year-old, she started to like pick out what she was going to wear and like participate in what sports she wanted after quitting them all when she was 10 and being very like traumatized. And I thought like, oh my God, like something so little, like almost made me want to cry. Like I could cry now thinking about it. Cause I'm just like I feel like people get really hopeless because it is a long game, you know, it's a long game.
Well, it's hopeless if you don't do the work.
Totally. 100%.
You have a choice in the matter. And I think too many people just throw their hands up and feel like they don't have a choice. They have a choice. Like not making a choice is also a choice.
Yes, I love that. I teach my clients that all the time.
You know,
so do you feel like, would you make the choice again over and over?
Would I make the choice again to leave?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
So what
but I'm somebody who's interested in personal growth and development. So I take it on. What's up, baby?
Me too.
I'm on the phone, honey. In about 15 minutes, okay?
Absolutely fresh. Oh my gosh.
Honey, just give me 10. Yeah, okay, go.
We're all moms around
I was not doing well in that relationship. Like I had debilitating stomach pain for a very long time, which, you know, the doctors diagnosed as endometriosis. Funny enough, a Chinese medicine doctor got me out of pain in 3 days. The gynecologist wanted to take out my fallopian tubes at the age of 35, you know? So like, I didn't have my son until I was 44. If I had listened to traditional medicine, I wouldn't have a child right now.
I love that.
I was, I had like a significant amount of brain, like cognitive dissonance and brain fog and confusion. I was coming in and out of moments of sobriety. I was like, you know, in terms of like having these epiphanies of like what was really going on in the relationship and then gaslighting myself. Like the one thing that people I think don't realize when you're in a narcissistic relationship, one of the many challenging things to deal with is how you gaslight yourself.
Yes.
You know, and it's not something that we talk enough about, in my opinion, but what really happens is you start to justify and excuse the behavior of your narcissistic partner, knowing that it's not okay, out of fear of, you know, having been made a mistake or being judged or knowing that you're going to have to leave, being afraid of the unknown, like all of that jazz, not believing there's going to be somebody else better out there for you, you know? And so you tell yourself whatever you kind of need to tell yourself to rationalize it, justify it, validate it. And that is its own layer of it's like, it's a mind fuck all on its own.
Conflict. Yeah.
Yeah. And then you layer that with what's actually going on. And it makes you very unclear, and it takes you away from your sense of self, off your center. And that's what the narcissist wants, because the less grounded you are, the easier you are to control. The less you're in your head, not knowing what's going on, confused in the fog, the easier you are to control. The less you're gaslighting yourself and saying this is okay, the easier you are to control. And so, yeah, your question was, is would I do it again? Yes, I would leave again. Yes, I would do the work all over again. And I'm in it for who I get to become on the other side of doing the work. With each layer of the unraveling or the peeling back of the onion is a happier, more empowered, confident version of myself, is a more authentic version of myself, is a more emotionally intelligent, emotionally resilient version of myself, and with all of that, my health gets better. Like I was able to get pregnant. So I went through the divorce. I had breast cancer. I was 42 years old. I had met a younger man and I wanted to have a baby. And I refused cancer treatment to get pregnant, which the doctors were not in alignment with. But I knew that I knew what work I was up for, and I was willing to do that work. And 8 months after my lumpectomy, I refused the treatment. I was supposed to do 25 radiation treatments and 2 years of tamoxifen. I wasn't a candidate for chemo. And I was just like, no, I'm going to bet on myself and I'm going to change my ways, And I asked the doctor, like, what's the chance of the cancer coming back if I do nothing? They wanted me to do the treatment protocol for 15% benefit. And I was like, this just doesn't sound great. And he's like, well, I don't know. That's a different spreadsheet. And I think it's important that if you get diagnosed with something, it's really important to start to challenge the statistics.
Absolutely.
They give you the statistics. So I had a 89% chance the cancer wouldn't come back systemically in 5 years, and then an 82% chance. So I'm 5 years cancer free now. My son is 4. So now my chances have reduced to 82% chance. And then like every 5 years it goes down. But I was like, that it doesn't seem like there's enough to cost benefit for me to take the treatment when I really want to get pregnant. I go, what happens if I, change my lifestyle, my thought patterns, my survival mechanisms? Like, what if I do all that? And they're like, we don't take that into consideration. And I was like, well, I'm going to take that into consideration and I'm going to do the work. So 8 months after my lumpectomy, we were blessed with being pregnant 3 weeks before the pandemic.
Amazing.
And I was at a fertility clinic because of my age. I was a geriatric mom, and so they wanted to monitor me. And the doctors were like, you're having a miracle pregnancy. You're the eldest woman in the clinic. And at the end of the week, when we do our rounds, you're the one we talk about. And we don't understand how, after all the trauma you've been through, how you're having such a fantastic pregnancy. I never threw up. I didn't get headaches. I gained like 50 pounds.
Well, you're giving me hope because you look amazing now. So
I lost all the weight. I had to work for it. I hired a trainer 6 weeks after because I had an unscheduled C-section, and I worked out 3-4 times a week with the trainer until I lost the weight. It took me 7 months, but I did it. And it's about, healing from narcissistic abuse, regardless of what form it comes in my opinion, is about, it's like you have to become an Olympic athlete at the game. You've been playing the wrong game your entire life, and now you quickly have to get up to speed and become an Olympian at this game, choosing yourself, self-soothing, reparenting, prioritizing your own needs, like all of that, forgiveness practices, gratitude practices, vision, making sure that your vision for your future propels you forward, and it's going to outdo anything you ever experienced in the past.
Yeah.
All of that, changing the way you think, to changing the way you things you believe in, changing your identity, like how you look and feel about yourself.
Isn't that interesting? So do you have kids with your narcissistic ex-partner?
That was a conscious choice.
I love that.
He was not the father for my children. It was okay to be a partner. I mean, we were very successful together. We grew from nothing. And he was a great partner for that. But no, I would have had 2 children and I would have been a terrible mom because I wouldn't have been properly supported. And
oh, yes, I can resonate with that statement. With it. I can say also, though, you can heal it. You know what I mean? So I'm only saying that because that was one of my experiences. However, funny enough, I had my children outside of a marriage, and then I willingly entered into that contract. So that threw a whole nother layer of chaos into the mix, as you can imagine. Because not only was it emotional, but then it was on paper justified. So,
right. Yeah.
It just, there's lots of layers. I mean, we could probably talk about that forever, but oh my gosh, on this cancer thing, what a radical choice. I will tell you, I do a lot of women who come with a breast cancer diagnosis, and then what they want to see what's reality, like on my scan, because you can't see on certain imaging and lab tests what is actually in whatever mass. Like,
Right.
so, or if you can, like, I love that you asked that question about the statistics. They're not going to tell you unless you ask. You actually
Yeah.
are free. Again, in the interest of not having a narcissistic abuse pattern in healthcare, you are free to ask the questions, and for the information is yours. Like, it is yours to have. I think a lot
Yeah,
of
the
people
problem is once you hear that word cancer, your brain goes into such fight
feel
or
like I'm
flight. There's so
dying.
much fear. Well, you can't the strength it takes to be able to have the critical thinking skills and the
Yes.
questioning skills to put it together, to connect the dots without having somebody coach you through it is like, and I didn't have somebody coach me through it. I'm a great critical thinker. So, and I didn't want to do treatment. So I was constantly asking questions about how not to do that.
Me too.
But if you don't, if like, once you get into that level of fear, and if you don't have somebody who can coach you through it, and like you said, the thought pattern goes right to I'm dying.
Oh, I got a pacemaker implanted into my body to beat my heart out of fear. And I am also like you. I was a product of a narcissistic parent situation. And so one of the gifts that I like, people say, how'd you find forgiveness? How'd you find forgiveness? Honestly, the gift was it made me a badass at discernment. Like, it really did. Like, it
Yeah,
was like I think that was always my life path. You know, I'm
right.
like, God literally chose that for me. I chose it. Well, whoever chooses it, I might have chose it at a soul level in heaven. I'm not really sure. But like, I chose that family line, so I don't hate it. Like, I'm actually really grateful for it now. But what's interesting is that I'm like you. I just have an ability to ask all the questions and all the scenarios. And it's made me this amazing business person, and amazing at strategy and all that, and amazing at healing. And what's interesting is, but you forget, you don't even know the questions to ask if you're not like that. That's what I'm like.
Yeah.
There has to be some kind of offer. Like, recently, I went through a pacemaker replacement because I wanted to get it deprogrammed to be turned off, but they wouldn't do that, showing like a dead battery. So anyway, long story short, and I'm like, I questioned like what anesthesiologists, like if I met with one, if that would also be the person that showed up on the day, because believe it or not, they have the judgment call on how to do anesthesia. And I was pregnant when I was having the replacement. And so I didn't want to go under general. I didn't want an anesthesia that had a belief system in general anesthesia in pregnancy. And just that, I've said that to people, and people are like, how in God's name did you come up with that? It's like, I love your mind, right? Your critically
Right.
thinking mind, because
Right.
that statistic thing is real. Every client that I have seen, less than 2% of women wouldn't have like another 40 to 80 years without chemo to live anyway once they get it removed. Now, whatever way you choose to get a tumor removed or to reset your body, that's a choice. But it is like overwhelmingly high for like survival, and you're not wrecking your whole body to do it. I love that you did that. That's so amazing.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah.
That's so cool. So like, okay, I mean, do you have a hard stop? Do you want to keep going, or do you need to go
We
before?
could go for a little bit. So I
Okay.
was just going to say something about like the forgiveness piece about forgiving your like parents, let's just say.
Yes.
So I can get to a place with most people that I can forgive them for their ignorance. Like they
Mm-hmm.
just don't know better.
They don't. That's born
And
out of their own trauma and their family line and
yeah,
everything
I
else.
mean, like I hold the belief that everybody is responsible for their own healing, and everybody like it's we have a responsibility to learn.
Yeah.
And I've gotten over getting angry and resentful and judging people. I just remove myself from those circles now.
I love that. I
Like
think
you
that's
just, that's who you are. And I get that. And that's not where I'm at in my evolution. And I'm looking to surround myself with people who are a match for where I'm at in my own evolution. And that requires somebody who's done some work. It's like, it's almost like, I'm an elite athlete now, and I want to play with other elite athletes. I've done a
yeah.
lot of, I've done the reading, I've done the work, I've done and I just want to play with people at my level. And I'm okay with that. And I don't judge you. We're just not a match. And I can forgive the people in my life, like even my ex-husband. Like it's unfortunate that, in my opinion, too, it's just an opinion thing, and it's not my own opinion, but like narcissism for me is just born out of trauma, and it's a developmental issue. And unfortunately, people just don't develop past the age of 5 in certain areas.
Yeah.
And so, something scared them, and they're just acting like little 5-year-old children, either having a temper tantrum or who are scared and trying to protect themselves and make them look good. And fundamentally, it's actually very sad. And I can it's super sad because they can't look at themselves to face their own shame because it's too painful for them. So they don't get the growth out of it because they won't do that work, because for them, it's like, it's crippling. And we all know what it's like to look at our own shame or to look at our negative patterns or to see how shitty we've showed up in a relationship. Like, it doesn't feel good. And you can't take any responsibility, or you don't have any power to change it. And so you get stuck. And so for them, there's like, I can come to a place of seeing who they actually are. And it's just like, it's unfortunate. And then for those who are like intentionally psychotic and like really intentionally hurt people, like on the other side of it, it's like, okay, so that person is treating you that poorly. So why do you stay? So let's just like have that conversation. Like, what is it about you that you don't want to change such that you're willing to accept this type of abuse, you know? And so I kind of look at it from, everybody has the responsibility to make them the change for themselves. And the fear of believing there's nobody else out there is one of the things that really keeps us stuck.
Yeah, that's an interesting fear. It's so interesting. That never kept me stuck, but I had a different situation. I mean, I know that's a lot of people's. Another thing, one of the things that did keep me stuck was how hard it was going to be for the kids. Like my perception before I had boundaries and before I had tactics and before I understood, tactics is a bad word because I did actually realize pulling myself out of the fight was half the problem. So I'm like when I say tactics, I mean tactical strategies to not participate is what I should say. It was interesting. It was looking at my toddlers and being like, we got a long ass road here. You know what I mean? And having like lived some of that was hard, but also because there's things that feel like incredibly impossible. So like, but you realize that they're not. One of the things for me that has been so refining and so amazing and really pulled me out of, because we all have our tendencies to get into judgment and whatever. It's like, it pulled me out of religious nature. It pulled me out of so many things. It pulled me out of the truther movement during COVID. Like, it's just like all kinds of stuff, right? Because I don't resonate with any of that anymore. I'm like, for me, life is such a complex fractal duality realm, and it's fun for me. It's like an adventure. What pulled me out of that was doing life with someone who has, you know, access 50% of the time, like every other day, you know what I mean? And then also has control of certain aspects of the life. So, you know, like, for example, one of the biggest parts I've talked about on my journey is my ex controls our schools. And I have never agreed with our schools, like our school system that we've done.
Like for his work, you mean?
No, for my kids. So
like he gets to make that decision?
Yes. Yeah. So the educational address it lies with him. Which is hard.
Okay, he's not home yet. He's still at school. Give me 5 minutes, okay, baby? Okay,
yeah, we'll totally wrap this up. But anyway, not playing the victim to that has been the greatest gift ever. And also being able to support my children in that, because what's interesting is when I spent a few years being like, and it's not like you're not a human. So there is stuff I do not like about the schools, right? Sure. There are realities that I'm like, hey, this school's not serving you here. The school's not serving you here. But I also, in certain ways, had allowed myself not to participate. Like, you know, oh, he's on the board. I mean, he built an entire ecosystem around a school to tell a lie about me. Like, it's like ridiculous. And so anyway, my point is that I allowed myself to be like intimidated by that. And this was like a real overcoming, like just the last layer. Like, if you asked me, I'd be like, oh my gosh, we function really well. Like, it's like, okay, I'm not in his life. He's not, you know, whatever, we're good. But this was kind of the last layer that surfaced after COVID was this school thing. And I said to my husband the other day, I said, I feel like, you know, in the interest of taking responsibility, I've had a role. I have not been like, you know, around the school as much. Like, of course I show up to all the ball games. Of course I'm there for my kids. It's not that, but it's not like I'm like on the PTO or establishing friendships there. Like, that's just not my jam. Well, me and my husband have 4 other kids together. We have 4 other children that are ours now. And obviously we're parenting them way differently. And so, hold
on a second, yeah.
He's so cute. And this is like story of my life with my kids, so I totally get it.
Sorry, he's home today. He's got a rash.
Don't apologize. Oh my gosh, it's like my children. We have 6. They're always running around. Oh. So anyway, I realized this year. I'm like, okay, because my kids have never thrived in their schools. They've been CD students. It's one of those things where it's really hard to reconcile and say like, well, why would you want your kids there? Why? It's all about you, the ecosystem, the friendships, the school board. Like, you're on the school board, but your kids don't do well here. And so that's like been a hard thing. And so to see my kids lose the confidence in that and have no confidence and have no real deep friendships and things like that has been hard. But I always encourage people because I'm like, hey, like there's another side, like, but you don't get the other side by constantly pointing out like all the dysfunction, right? You literally
Right.
only have a choice to come alongside and support them there. So it's
Right.
like, okay, how can we do your homework together? How can we do this? Like, it's been a really refining journey of like shelving my own stress, about it. Even some days when they're like bawling in the floor, melting down, and do not want to go to school, you know what I mean? And like now that they're teens, what do? You freaking wrestle them into your car? No, you'll have a child abuse allegation.
Yeah.
Like, true. That is
Mhm.
really a reality that's happened in my life that has been wild to live. But I would still make the same choices to not participate. And the thing that I'm learning over and over is that, and one thing I said 2 weeks ago, which is kind of probably around the same time that I reached out to you, was with my husband. We had a situation where my husband now, one of my kids decided to come be with us for a while. He's like, I just can't handle whatever's going on, and that's okay because we are at that age where they can figure it out and they can choose.
Mhm.
And so we kind of like let all that play out. We've had our kids also choose to go there. So I don't want to show up here and say that it's just me and we're all perfect. It's not like that. It's just kids figuring it out. And I'm pretty protective of their stories, but he chose to come here for a while. And I said to my husband, I said, you know what? It has been such a refining, interesting thing to not pick up the pieces or orchestrate this for my ex. So my ex has asked me to figure it out, find the therapy, do this. It's all me. You know what I mean? It's like now that he's in, it's still after 10 years. And I said, so I literally just wrote him a text like one day and I was like, it is your job to restore the relationship with your child. Like, stop. You know what I mean? Like, full stop. It's not my job. And how many women like take on that stuff still in our conditioning? It was like still in my conditioning. And I'm like, I literally told my husband, I'm like, energetically, like, we are married. Like, I'm not putting this divide between us. You know what I mean? Like, it's a very real thing that I think people, it covertly slips in, and it's like so interesting to walk through. But
well, I think it also feeds an ego, right? Like if you're the parent trying to repair the relationship with the narcissist, you kind of look like the good guy.
Yes.
And that's like it's also another form of manipulation.
And they're doing the same thing, looking like the good guy, breaking down the other parent.
Well, yeah.
No, I know. I'm not saying that they're like good. Trust me. Like there is a real clear-cut fine line with narcissists where they truly engage in emotionally manipulating someone. They literally.
No, I don't mean that. I just mean like if you're the mother and you're trying to repair the relationship with your son and his narcissistic father, like there's some people in that role take it on because it makes them look like the good guy.
Yes,
and it's just more manipulation because it's not coming from an actual genuine place of wanting to repair the relationship. It's like, see, I'm actually trying. You know what I mean? Like I'm just trying to help you out. It's just another form of playing the game. Whereas what you're doing is like you're removing yourself, which is what you should be doing because you don't want to get in the way of the relationship the father has with the child, and all you really want to do is just be there for your child to listen and to like, and if there's an opportunity for you to encourage that child to go face his father, that's different than trying to meddle and,
Yeah, we've done that. One of the key phrases in my life is like, I'm not your Holy Spirit. like I try to stay in that line, like, right? Like I don't want to be your God. I don't want to be your guru. Like I want you to know that you are like a powerful, self-healing being, right? And I want for my kids or anybody I'm in contact with to know that. I want to know that they're so deeply connected, right, to themselves, because that's where you avoid disease and not avoid, like, that's where you truly stay aligned in that high healing resonance, right? And I'm like, that to me, like that resonance you talk about, any little compromise is a disruption. We have to acknowledge it. It's a disruption. Like if I go drink a Diet Coke, it's a disruption. Is it going to be a big one? Who knows? But, now if I go give myself to someone or a friendship that doesn't make any sense, that could be a big disruption, like a cancer causing disruption. It's like, it's wild how, it's so, and I had the same, very similar. I had massive female issues. And even though I have blessed with all these babies, had them while I was in that marriage, which was crazy.
Wow.
Major autoimmune trauma. My kids have autoimmune stuff that goes on, but hey, we're working on it. But it usually surfaces around these big decisions. But anyway, I'm so excited we got to talk. We should do a whole entire one on what you chose and your therapies and all that for overcoming illness, because I'd love to talk about that.
Yeah, we can do that. No problem. We can book it again for a couple of weeks or something like that. Yeah. Reach out. We'll book it.
Absolutely. And I will get all the information. So just for y'all watching on how you can work with Sophie, because obviously this is the deep work. And I know there's so many people in my audience that need it. That's why I reached out to her. I'm like, I'll put all that in the show notes and linked up how you guys can connect. Because my stuff is focused on chronic illness restoration, but it's like your piece is so critical for so many people.
Well, and for that too, right? Like if you can't heal your chronic illness in the same mindset or in the same identity.
No.
Yeah. Never. So, or in the same belief system. So yeah, that would be amazing. I would love that. And we can continue to have the conversations. We can like continue them every, like once a month or something if you want.
I would love that. That
would be a topic and yeah.
That would be so cool. We're super aligned in that. Well, enjoy your babies.
Thank you. You too.
Yeah. I will talk to you soon.
Okay. We'll talk soon. Have a great day.
All right. Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.